This carport was already here when we bought the property. That was about 10 years ago. It's the first thing you see when you visit. It's a bit ugly and it doesn't look like it belongs to the house. In this video, I'm going to attempt to dress it up and make it look better. The main thing I'll do is clad the posts and the bigger beams with wood. This will hide all the electrical conduits and should match the posts on the house and hopefully tie the two together. This section of steel that covers a fairly large gutter will be replaced by wooden sleepers. At the moment it's made up of grating, checker plate and rebar, and I reckon wood will look much better and much neater. We're also adding a section of mesh around the outside of the fascia to give the jasmine something to climb on and hopefully have a living green border around the top. There's a few other things we'll do to the area too, like painting the underside of the roof, and I'll get started with that first. I could have taken the carport down and started again with something much nicer, maybe with a gable and open trusses, but that would have been a big project and it would have been expensive too. Since I started on YouTube, the house and property have been badly neglected, as making videos takes up all of my time. I wouldn't have thought to make a video of this, but hopefully some of you will find it helpful or enjoyable enough, and at the same time I get to finish a house project, keep Kath happy and make a video. I thought it would need 2 coats, but it looked great with just the one, so I left it at that. I'll set myself up with a temporary workbench and start cladding the beams. The wood is rough sawn treated pine. It's cheap as far as wood goes, and it'll match the finish of the posts on the house. I'll be building a fence next to the carport very soon. I've made a design for it. It will be made from steel and wood, and I think it should look pretty cool. These boards are 150mm or 6 inches wide, which is exactly the same as the beam that they'll be covering. They're much thicker than they need to be though, so I'll resaw them down the middle on the bandsaw and I'll get 2 boards for the price of 1. I'm also doing this as I don't want the finished cladded beams to be any wider than they need to be. It took a while, but the bandsaw did a great job and it did it easily enough. I need to remove these supports and I'll be replacing those with more substantial brackets later on. These screw heads will prevent the board from sitting flat, so I'll use some plywood packers to slightly bring the board forward. I'm using self-drilling metal screws to fix the boards to the metal beam, but later on I started pre-drilling them as I found that easier. I reckon that's starting to look pretty good. For the underneath, I have these 100mm or 4-inch wide boards that fit perfectly. Another reason why I resawed those pieces on the sides of the beams. I had to take off a couple of millimeters off the head of these screws as they were slightly sticking out. I'm nailing the edges and then fixing the board with screws into the metal beam afterwards. There's a couple of sections of these bolt heads sticking up, so I'll route out a recess on the back of the board. That's the first beam done, and I've done the back of the next beam off camera. Now I need to deal with the front of it and cover up the conduits. It's simple enough to go around the conduits by adding these treated pine battens. The front beams will be wider than the back, but I'm not too worried about that, and I don't think it will be too noticeable. I need a recess on the back of the board where the conduit goes into the junction box. And by the way, I had an electrician out to come and slightly change the position of the box and the conduits to give me room to box it in. You can just see in there where the recess is that I chiseled out. The junction box sticks out a little too much to cover it with the board. I could have done that, but the whole beam would have been wider, and I reckon it would have started to get too wide. For the underneath, I'm using some of the boards that I resawed earlier in the video, and I've just ripped those down to the right width. That's the beams done. I'll have a quick tidy up and I'll get started on the posts. I'll start on this post because it's the easiest and it hasn't got any obstacles to go around. Now that I have two opposite sides fixed, I'll rip down some strips to fill in the other sides, and the offcuts from those will come in handy later on. That's the easy one done. Now I'll move on to the one with the conduits and the main reason for doing this project. I've gone ahead and fixed the first two boards off camera. The only thing I've done different is brought them forward, and that's to give enough room to cover the conduits. And those offcuts from earlier happen to be the exact size to fit across there and match the width of the beam. The next strip doesn't quite sit flush, so I need to route a channel out of the back, and that will provide some clearance for the conduits. It was a bit fiddly fitting the strip and holding the conduits in place, but it wasn't too difficult. I'm gluing and clamping them for now, and then I'll put some screws in later on. I didn't nail it just in case any nails went astray, even though they shouldn't, but I didn't want to hit a cable. The rain has set in, so now it's a good time to get into the workshop and make some post brackets. I made one off camera just to see if I liked it, and now I'll make the rest of them. I could have just screwed the diagonal brace, but to give it more strength I've chopped it into the other pieces. I'm using the pieces off the first one to set the measurements. I actually lost the footage of me finishing the post bracket and assembling it, so I've made another one just to fill that in. The four brackets will support the structure from left to right, looking from the front. I still need to support it in the opposite direction, and I'll do that later on with the mesh panels that I'll be making and fitting around the top. I reckon the video is long enough already to make this a part 1, and I'll get on and finish the project in part 2. I could have made one long video, but you would have had to wait another week or so for that, and this seemed to make sense to put it out in 2 parts. It's a bit different to my usual videos, but it's a project that we really wanted to get done. We're very happy with it, and it should look great when it's been sanded and finished. We're not sure if we're going to paint or stain it yet, but we'll do that in the next video, along with changing that grate with some wood over the gutter and some mesh around the top for the jasmine to grow around. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.